The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning. Welcome to 12 Points Wealth Management webinar on raising financially fit children. We are due to get started here in another minute or two. I've got a few more people to join. So bear with me a minute while we have them gather, and then we will start. So thanks for joining us today. My name is Deborah Cardiser, and I have a practice here at 12 Points Wealth Management, focusing primarily on women and helping empower women to master their finances, often when they've been through some sort of transition and haven't done it necessarily before. And really what I like to do is get my clients to the point where they know what they have, where it is, and how it serves them. And really this allows people to then confidently create what comes next. I've worked with multi-generational families and helping them transfer their wealth, and that's kind of what my practice focuses on. But I'm very passionate about helping people raise financially fit kids. And in putting together these webinars, I realized how little I had prepared my own kids for some of these things. So I think it's opened my eyes, and hopefully it'll be helpful to you and open your eyes. So what we're covering today is some facts on financial literacy, which are pretty sobering. The idea of really fostering responsibility so our kids can have greater independence. And the more responsibility they assume and they show us they can master, the more independence we can give them. The idea of living with consequences, which as a parent is sometimes hard to watch and to do. Teaching kids to understand credit. A little blurb about college tuition and debt. Talking about investing and getting kids on board with investing and how it all works. And showing them how to give back, teaching them about that, and then a little bit about legacy planning. Now, all of these things could be webinars in and of themselves, so we're going to cover a lot today, but I wanted you to know that at the end, we're going to, I'll be sending out some tasks, and I'll go into more of that in a minute. But financial capability study is done every 3 years, and what we're seeing in this country is that the literacy rate is declining, and this is how people evaluate themselves and how confident they feel about their financial capabilities. 53% of adults thinking about finances makes them anxious. 18 to 34-year-olds report the greatest levels of financial stress, which isn't really surprising since they're probably the lowest earners. But the next two kind of scared me because it's about teenagers, and more than 30% don't believe they're going to be financially independent from their parents by age 30. And if you're watching this webinar, you're probably a parent, and that probably scares you as much as it does me. 4 out of 10 thinking they can't live on their own when they're older. And the last one is 75% of parents believe that it's their moral imperative to give financial guidance to their kids, and not having the clarity on how to do it is a hallmark of all of this. So hopefully this will help you to get to that point. I like this quote. The difference between fantasy and the realization of the dream is having the financial skills to make the fantasy come to life. And that's really what our jobs focus on here at 12 Points, and as planners and preparers for our clients, helping them have that preparation is so important. And as parents, empowering our kids to have that is really so important. And it's our job to help provide them with that foundation to be able to live the life of their dreams. So I really like that for this webinar. By way of background, I think it's important to note that there's 7 money personalities, and it's helpful as a parent to be aware of this, because your children, just personality-wise, are not going to be the same, obviously, and their money personalities are not going to be the same. So you may want to adapt how you do what you do differently with each kid. The hoarder is somebody who is really loves to have money for money's sake. They want it, the tangibility of money. There's someone who's going to have a lot of cash on hand. This is the proverbial keeps their money in the mattress personality type. So they like money for money's sake. The spendthrift, we all know about them. The scrimper is the person who's the bargain hunter. They want to buy things on sale. They're searching the web avidly to find the best deal. And this person is likely to be penny wise and pound foolish. And one of the lessons as a parent to help them with is the difference between quality and price. The giver is kind of obvious. They're the ones who are giving their money away and taking care of everybody else to the point that they have nothing left for themselves. The beggar, this one you can really help your child with if you start early. The beggar has their hand out all the time. And as a parent, you're going to want to not enable them to spend all their money and continue to ask for more. The need and the thought process in this child needs to be worked on. So keep that in the back of your head. Don't enable them with handouts all the time. The hustler is the deal maker. They're likely to have an entrepreneurial kind of thought process and spirit to them. They are they're going to be out hustling, making deals, probably working early, using lemonade stands as kids, those kinds of things. And the oblivious wants to have no part of dealing with money, really doesn't want to deal with it. I have one of these, and she is so smart, but really doesn't care about money. It doesn't matter to her. Crumpled up dollar bills found in strange places, and can never find her wallet. And so I've been focusing on sort of forcing her to come up through the ranks and to take on responsibility when she doesn't particularly want to in this area. So we're working on, with our kids, 10 basic money skills and teaching them the how-tos of these various areas. And here's where I'm going to have activities and things that I can send out to people afterwards to give you specific tools to foster development for your kids in these areas. And I have two spreadsheets. One's for the younger kids and one's for the older kids. And I'm going to lump everything together today in talking about these topics. But afterwards, we'll follow some more specific suggestions on how to get them on board and learning. And the most important of this is saving. Saving's the foundation of having money, obviously. So learning to save is of paramount importance. Teaching them how to get paid what they're worth, and we'll talk about that more in a minute. Spending wisely, obviously, is a huge component of this. But for me, the most important piece of this whole webinar, and what I learned from preparing for this webinar that I wasn't doing with my kids, is talking about money. Money was sort of one of those things that my parents grew up with, which was not taboo, but it was certainly not discussed in polite society. So I sort of took on that mantra with my kids and realized, wow, I'm missing on educating them. So the more you can talk about money with your kids in all different types of frameworks, the better off they're going to be. They're going to understand your thinking. They're going to understand how you're doing what you're doing, why, and it's going to just prepare them. So really bringing them in on conversations. You don't have to talk specific dollar amounts, but talk about your evaluative processes. It's going to be important. So we'll get to more of these: handling credit, exercising an entrepreneurial spirit, learning how to invest. Obviously, learning how to live within a budget is key to all of this. And then more esoteric is how to use money to change the world and how to be a citizen of the world. And those will probably show up more in the spreadsheet that I'll send you afterwards than in this conversation. So allowance. Allowance is critically important. And hang on for just a second. My slides are not showing, and I'm not sure why. Okay, well, there's always something with these webinars. Sorry about that. Thanks for thanks for the feedback. I'll continue with where I was since we can go back and yeah, anyway, here we are. Learning to earn is a critical piece of this. So people have various opinions about allowances. So what I want people to think about is this is a tool. It's not an entitlement. It's not a salary. It's simply a tool to learn about money. And really the more, and there's no right number, you guys can come up with that on your own, obviously, but the better children learn to handle money, the more responsibility you can give them and the bigger the allowance they can have to practice with. And I'm not going to go into value judgments around all of that. You'll come up with your own in your own household, but you can also treat different children differently here and have reasons behind doing what you're doing. I think one of the key things that we've learned along the way is that teaching children consistency about spending, saving, and giving away is really important. It's important to be consistent. So with little kids, you can have 3 separate piggy banks. It's a great craft to have kids come up with spend, save, give buckets or bottles or banks or whatever you want to put together, a nice handy little craft. But teaching them along the way to devise these percentages, and obviously in the beginning you're going to devise them for them, but have them do it consistently. So if they get birthday money from their lovely grandmother, that money then goes through the same percentages, a portion of it to spend, save, and give, and the same proportions. So it really becomes a ritual. And if you can teach your kids to do this early, it's going to help them when they get their first paychecks, because we've all heard the adage of paying yourself first, and having that save jar is really, really important. Teaching them how to earn more is going to be important. And you can do this with little kids, from matching socks to teenagers mowing the lawn and running errands for you and things like that. And think of it as something that you do, you would pay them to do for you, not cleaning their room, not something that's expected of them, but something additional that they would do for you. And remember, all the way along the way, this is learning money. So allowance is learning money, nothing more. It doesn't have to be a big to-do. And now my slides won't advance. There we are. So you want to be fostering all along the way greater independence and teaching them how to do that. So teach them how to negotiate rates, teach them how to earn what they're worth. And, you know, if matching socks is worth 50 cents a sock, that's great. If they want to tell you that the lawn takes longer than you think and they should get paid more, let them negotiate that. Allow them to have part of that process. Starting out with bank accounts is really important. A little passbook, those are still available if you remember those things where the child enters the deposit that they make, but getting them to go to the bank, getting them to understand that, you know, we don't just use plastic cards to pay for things, but there's a bank account behind that. You can start that with very little children. And introducing the debit card. With my oblivious daughter, the debit card has been critically important, and now she's much more responsible than she was with those silly paper bills. And for older kids, teaching them about building credit, really important, and we'll get to more of that in a minute. Teach them comparison shopping for prices, for fees, and things like that. Involve them in the discussion, whether it's at the grocery store or whether you're getting a new credit card because your fees have been raised. Whatever it is, teach them along the way what you're doing and why you're doing it, because it's an important component to just teach the thought process. And these were the kinds of things that I wasn't teaching my kids about and involving them in the discussion of. And it's so easy to just stop for a minute and say, I have these two things in my hand because I'm looking at them. I'm evaluating price and quality and volume and all those things. Little kids understand size differences and things like that. So you can start this discussion with very little kids. Involving them in family decisions is a great way to do this. I caution you as a parent not to involve them in the discussion if they're not actually going to have a vote, but maybe you can do things, for instance, choosing a vacation site. You could say to them, look, we could have 3 days at Disney versus 5 days at the beach. Which do you prefer? They cost the same amount of money. Letting them understand that there's a different evaluation process that takes place. And then, saving together is a fun activity that you can do. Maybe you're all putting money into a jar or taking change at the end of the week or at the end of the allowance period, and they can make a contribution to a family saving project, whatever that is, that you all do together. That can be a fun way to watch things add up and show them savings. The most important thing as a parent is to suspend judgment on what they're spending their money on. If they're staying out of trouble, you don't need to judge why they bought the stuffed animal or, what they're choosing to spend their money on. As a kid, I do remember my dad offering an opinion one time on something that I'd spent a lot of time saving for, and he thought it was dumb and I didn't. But after he made his comment, I realized I looked at it differently and it wasn't the same, and I wasn't proud of my accomplishment anymore. So remember that your words have a lot of weight, and ask questions about why they're doing what they're doing instead of telling them what they should be doing. I think living with financial consequences is a hard one as a parent. It's hard to watch your kids suffer when you can do something about it. So if there's one thing I can caution you as a parent is don't rush in. Let them feel the impact of their choices here. I think if they can learn some of these lessons in their teenage years or even elementary school years, it will save them a lot of heartache and headache when the problems and mistakes are bigger when they're in their 20s. So keeping that in mind, hopefully will help us to keep hands off. And, it's one thing to say about your partner or spouse, oh, I'll just do this for you, but don't tell, dad, mom, whomever about it. Keep your hands out of it and let them feel it. Little kids can recognize and control want versus need, especially even little toddlers can learn want versus need. And so teaching them those lessons along the way is really important, and not bailing them out. If they've spent all their money, let them feel the consequences of not going to the movies with their friends because they bought all the things that glitter along the way. And giving them freedom with money is going to help them to learn these lessons along the way. I think, learning to manage spontaneity and opportunity is something that we all have to manage. And so if they can learn to control these things when they're younger, it's going to make a bigger difference when they're older. Missing out on going to the movies with their friends because they spent all their money earlier in the week it matters. And sitting home, they're going to feel that. Putting off saving for the video game that they're saving for versus going out and doing something that just pops up into their world, it matters. So let them live with the consequences of that. And if you do have to bail them out for whatever reason, then insist that they pay you back. So come up with a schedule for repayment and talk to them about how it's going to work, and then insist that they pay you back. Don't just leave it for them as a permanent loan or a gift. And then the other thing is sharing successes and failures, talking to them about mistakes that you made when you were younger, or, how what it's like to be in their shoes, and things that you did or wish you could do differently. Talk to them about those kinds of things. My kids are sick of hearing about my college friends, post-college friends who ran up huge credit card debt and what they did about it and how long it took them to pay it back. So stories matter. So tell them yours. Understanding credit is a really big thing, and little kids can learn this lesson, and bigger kids obviously need to master this lesson. But I just did with my kids, I pulled both their credit reports and I had them do it with me. And then we talked about why we did it, what the FICO score is and what matters and who's using it. So applying for loans, applying to buy a house. Now even applying for jobs, people are looking at these things and pulling credit reports. So it's critically important that they stay on top of it. And pulling the report annually is, part of good hygiene. And as a parent, you should also be looking at your kids. I've heard tell of situations where someone's social security number had been used to apply for credit and the kid is 6 years old. So it's up to you to look at these things periodically. Teach your kids to repay any credit card debt in full. If you can't pay it off, don't buy it. And talking to them, show them paying off credit card debt when you're buying it, or why you're using a credit card versus a debit card, those kinds of things. Any kind of lesson that you can give your child along these lines of when you use credit versus debit is important. We talked about paying back, and there are different types of debt, obviously, and they are not the same. A $100,000 mortgage is totally different than $100,000 worth of credit card debt. There are lots of graphs on the internet that you can pull off and show them visually what it takes to pay off $10,000 worth of credit card payments using minimum payments and how many years it takes. It's sobering. So show it to them. Teach them how to shop for a card and then get them one. And obviously kids without income and below a certain age can't have a credit card, but as they start to become older and have more independence out in the world, having a credit card is important. And you can teach them how you're going to look at different rates, what evaluative tools you would use to get a credit card, and then have them start establishing some history. Do things like have something like their gas expenses for every week paid for on the credit card, and then go through the motions of with them initially and then on their own of paying it back at the end of each month and paying those bills off, so that the credit card companies begin to see them building a credit history of their own. And we somehow went backwards. I am not having good luck today with my technology. Sorry about that. A little blurb here about college tuition and debt. With older kids, and we have some webinars on our website that go into more detail on this, but I would just caution you as parents to, before the process even starts, when they're a junior, early junior year, start talking to them and maybe beforehand about what you're planning to contribute to college and involve them in the process so they have an understanding of what they can afford, what kinds of decisions they have, and use financial criteria before you start the process. Don't just open up, if there are constraints on the finances that you're going to provide for your child, don't open up the process and then restrict it later. So the other thing I tell my clients, I tell anybody who asks the question, is to give money a seat at the table when you're deciding where to go. If money's no option, obviously this doesn't apply, but if there are constraints with money and you don't want your kid burdened under a great deal of debt, have money and tuition amounts be an evaluative tool that you use the same as you use anything else when you line up the schools and think about them. And as parents, the first thing I tell people is there are no loans for retirement. So you really have to put your oxygen mask on first and take care of your savings needs before you start paying for your kids' college. So make sure that, you obviously want to borrow as little as possible, but you've got to take care of your long-term savings before you take care of your kids' college requirements. And then Another important exercise to talk to and involve kids in is look at starting salaries for careers they're thinking about. I know a lot of 18-year-olds don't know what they want to do when they grow up, but start looking at things that they might be interested in and look at what they may be taking on for tuition and college repayment debt, and then look at loan estimators and studentloans.gov to see starting salaries versus what their monthly payments will be like for those loans. So bring them into the whole process and then use forward tools to help them to evaluate how much do they want to take on. The other thing that I tell people all the time is if merit money's involved, go back and ask for more. Before you accept a college's offer, if they've offered merit money, go back and ask for more, because 9 times out of 10, you will get more. It may not be huge, but a few $1,000s over 4 years can make a difference. So avail yourself of that. Investing for the future. If you have any kind of savings and you're not keeping your money all in a bank account, which at some point most of us diverge from, teach your kids about investing for the future and what's involved. As soon as they're earning a salary, they can put money away for retirement and do that in a tax efficient way in an IRA account, et cetera. But teach them how the stock market works. Teach them what they're investing in and how. And, you can do this with little kids. You can talk about different companies and what it's like to own a fraction of that public company and why you would buy it. A couple of summers ago, I took my middle school daughter and her friends, and we had a lesson on the stock market, and I got them talking about what they'd want to buy and why. And it was such an interesting discussion, and they had such creative ideas and great observations on the economy. And this was early in COVID, and they were really looking around at how the economy had changed and the supply system had changed. And so they were saying, I want to buy shares of Costco. I want to buy shares of Apple. I want to buy shares in that hand sanitizing company. And they were all great ideas. So what we did was we picked a phantom portfolio of stocks, and each of the kids picked one. And then we followed it throughout the summer. And it was a great way of just staying in tune with the market fluctuations and how their investments had changed. So we started out with a phantom $10,000, and we talked about how it grew, and they got really excited. And every time they would see me, they'd ask for their update on their stocks that they picked. So it was a fun exercise. So little kids can get involved in this. And there's something online, the stockmarketgame.org, that you can play, and kids can get really involved pretty quickly. If you don't know how to read a balance sheet, go online. There's lots of information on that, and teach your children how to do this. And then tell them how you're investing. What do you have for savings accounts? You don't have to talk dollar amounts, but you can tell them what you're putting aside and how you're working on your savings and how you're investing. You've got money that's for retirement and it's not needed for X number of years. And so that's more long-term planning. And then the things that we're going to need for vacation, that's shorter-term planning, and talk to them about how you think about those things. And then if they get holiday money or birthday money that starts to build up and their bank account starts to get kind of full, have them buy a stock or two and something that they might want to hold long term, so they actually have an account with some investments in it. That can be really fun. And some of these kids really get the bug and want to continue and do these things. So give them oversight, but getting them started on this on their own is a great way to do that. And then if you have an investment advisor, have them sit in on a meeting. You can control these meetings so they don't hear about your net worth necessarily, but they can hear about the mechanics and how you interact with your advisor and how they report to you. Another important thing is life in our community and giving back. And as you start to save and you have money building up, and teaching them to have a give bucket, whether it's really simple for little kids, having them bring the pennies that they've saved and the dollars that they've saved to the local animal shelter or something like that, can be really meaningful. So having that give bucket is important even for little kids. And then teaching them other ways. You can teach them your values and then let them obviously express theirs, but show them the different ways that you can contribute to the community, whether it's the world at large or just locally in your town. Show them how you can volunteer. And then helping them to identify causes that matter to them is so important, because they're all going to be so different, and it's going to be fun to hear about what they want to do and things that are important to them. And then coming up with ideas for local support or national support, whatever it is, leading a drive to help their causes can matter. You know, whether it's collecting coats for the homeless, or getting people to setting up a walk or a bike ride to get money to contribute to an organization can be really meaningful and get them to participate. And then, you know, associating donating or giving with family rituals and holidays can be really fun. Whether you, get tags off a local tree where people are, in a local community, we've got little tags that hang on a holiday tree, and you can take them off and buy things for a local family in need or things like that. There's so many ways to do this. And the more that you can do it as a family, the more fun it can be. And, another thing that wealthy families do is to have a little, whether it's little or not little, a grant making board. And whether you make a contribution to your kids and have them decide where to donate it, or you get a donor advised fund or things like that, there's lots of ways to do this charitably and to involve your kids in it. So it's just a fun way to get them to express themselves and to start to participate in giving back to their communities. I think it's an important thing that we're all looking at these days a little differently than we did even a few years ago. So teaching your kids how you do that and then empowering them to do it themselves is great. Whether it's a lemonade stand for the little guys or the money that they've earned over the summer, can be really meaningful. And the last piece, estate planning. And I would advise everybody to have this discussion with all their kids. Little kids have a sense of what happens if something happens to mom and dad. Will I be okay? So explaining to them that, yes, we've thought about this. And yes, if something happens to us, this is the friend or relative that would take care of you. And you could leave it at that. Letting them know that you've planned and thought about these things is going to give them some comfort. And then for older kids, teaching them about the different roles that people play. And if you don't know what they are, you can send me an email and we can talk about it. But if you have kids, you should have an estate plan. You should have estate documents. They can be very simple. They can be more involved. Let your children meet with your estate planning attorney and sit in on a meeting and let them know that they're taken care of. As part of this and as part of your planning, you don't have to go into dollar amounts, but keep your kids apprised of, as they get older, the things that you do or don't intend to help them with. You may be able to help with a wedding, but you're not helping them with a down payment on a house. So they're going to have to do that on their own. You'll help them get started with $10,000, but that's the extent of it. So letting them know that in advance is going to help them to know what they need to provide for themselves. And then if there's an inheritance involved and there's family money involved, let them know what happens and who they go to if something happens. So that's really an important piece of it. And then where there are family trusts involved, either something that you're creating or another family member has created for you, it's really important to let them know where it came from, who made the money, how did they make the money, what is it for, what is it meant to be used for. And if you're creating trusts, let them know that why you're creating a trust, why that you don't, if something were to happen to you tomorrow and your child's not 18 years old, or, maybe they're 25, why there's a trust involved. And share your ideas with them, share your values with them, and help them to understand your framework and your thinking. And obviously there's more on this also on our website. One thing, if you've got children who are approaching or at age 18, make sure that they are signing those durable power of attorney and healthcare proxies. They're an adult at age 18 and all your access to their financials and their healthcare information is cut off. So you can even download those from websites online. But if you've got an estate planning attorney, it's quick and easy to have a quick draft pulled up for them to sign. So those are important things to think about. And I did it again. So important takeaways from all this is really considering yourself an active financial educator for your children and making sure that, just in passing, that you pull up your phone, you're checking your bank balance, let them know why you're doing it and what you're looking for. Let them understand what's happening and why in your world and why you're doing certain things that you're doing. Just keep them involved in the conversations. You don't have to give them dollar amounts. It can just be the framework behind things that they can be a part of. And you can do this with really little kids. I think it's important to praise their hard work and their initiative and not the money that they're earning, because obviously, well, I don't have to go into more detail on that one. And anything that they express in terms of interest or curiosity with questions, encourage them to keep diving deeper and to tell them what you don't know and go online together and look it up. And it's going to help them to develop that natural curiosity, which will be so helpful. And again, reserving judgment on what they spend their money on. If you've given them the money as an allowance and as their learning tool, keep your hands out of it after that and let them decide what to do with it. It's their free and clear money. They don't have to ask you permission. They get to do what they want with it. And then again, just including them where you can in your own financial world and making sure that you're a resource for them and teaching them about how you're making decisions, why you do what you do, and those kinds of things can help them tremendously. And I am available, as are the others at my firm, to answer any questions that you have. As I said, I'll send out the resource information on these topics, those 10 topics that we showed earlier, and I should probably go back and show those to you. So I'll have some spreadsheets that give you some resources on activities to do with kids, young and old, and books for you to read with children and things like that that will help you to teach these topics to them, whether they're preschoolers or whether they're teenagers. There's lots that you can do. So again, I make myself available. If you have any questions about the material that we covered today, send me an email. I'd be happy to answer any questions for you. I don't see any questions up here. So I hope that's been helpful to you today. Again, let me know if you have any questions or any feedback. I'll email you the information and feel free to contact me back with anything that comes up in the material that I send. So thanks again for attending our Raising Financially Fit Children. We will have another webinar later in the year that will be geared towards young adults. How do you help your adult children with finances and continue the learning process? So tune in later in the year for that one. And contact 12 Points Wealth Management at www.12pointswealthmanagement.com. And thanks for attending today, and hope to see you at future webinars. Bye-bye.